Okay, let's dive right in. We all talk about stress, right? That jolt of adrenaline you feel when you're under pressure. But what if I told you the real story is so much more intricate, more targeted, and frankly, way more amazing? In this explainer, we're going to break down what's really happening inside your body during a stress response.
So let's start with that common idea. When you think of fight or flight, do you picture a single massive alarm bell going off, just flooding your entire system with adrenaline? For a long, long time, that's pretty much what science taught us. Well, that simple story, it's about to get a major update.
The original concept, which goes back decades, was basically this. A stressor hits, a switch flips, and your sympathoadrenal system, that's a fancy term for your sympathetic nervous system and your adrenal glands working together, reacts as one big unified unit. Simple, powerful, but, a pretty blunt instrument. But here's the thing. We now know the reality is far more sophisticated. It's less like a single on-off light switch and a lot more like a complex control panel, with all these different dials and levers that your body can adjust with incredible precision, depending on the exact nature of the threat. And here's that first layer of complexity. Your body has at least two major systems that activate differently. You've got the system in your adrenal glands, which releases epinephrine, what we all know as adrenaline, and that's often for emotional stress, like fear. And then you have a system in your nerve endings, which releases norepinephrine, and that's usually for physical stress, like cold or exercise. Two different pathways for two very different kinds of challenges. And right here, we can see this specialization in action. The stress of public speaking? Yeah, that's an epinephrine-heavy response. A really tough workout? Your body dials up the norepinephrine. See? It's not just reacting blindly. It's actually tailoring the chemical cocktail to the situation. It's an incredibly intelligent, targeted response. And hey, this isn't just a fun theory. This quote from key researchers in the field pretty much confirms it. The crucial point is that the old one-size-fits-all model of stress is totally outdated. Your body is running multiple specific programs all at once. And just when you think you've got a handle on it, the picture gets even more detailed. It turns out your body doesn't just rely on central command from the adrenal glands. Nope, some organs have their own little local manufacturing plants for stress chemicals. These images illustrate this point perfectly. These show an enzyme that makes epinephrine right inside the heart muscle itself. You can see it in an embryo on the left, and it's still there in an adult on the right. This means your heart has its own ability to produce adrenaline, completely independent of the main adrenal glands. It's a localized, self-sufficient stress response system. How cool is that? But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. A fascinating recent study added a completely unexpected character to the story. Researchers looking at the hormonal stress response in women found something that really challenged their assumptions. The setup was pretty straightforward. They took women who were in a part of their cycle where ovarian hormones are naturally low. Now, this was key because it allowed them to isolate the stress response coming from the adrenal glands. They used a classic physical stressor, plunging a hand into ice water, and then they measured what happened to their hormone levels. So the first result was no surprise at all, totally expected. The cold water stress caused levels of cortisol, the classic well-known stress hormone, to rise significantly. This is basically stress response 101. But here's the twist. They found that progesterone levels also shot up in response to the stress. This was a surprise because progesterone is typically associated with the menstrual cycle and pregnancy, not the acute fight or flight response. And remember, these women were in a low progesterone phase of their cycle. So where was this coming from? So what exactly is progesterone and what is it doing here? Well, while it's famous for its reproductive roles, it's also produced in the adrenal glands of both men and women. This discovery suggests its role in our bodies is much broader than we thought, potentially playing a direct part in how we manage stress. This discovery led the researchers to a critical question. We see two hormones rising together, cortisol and progesterone. But is one causing the other to rise? Is there a leader and a follower in this little hormonal dance? Initially, the hypothesis was that progesterone amplified the cortisol response. It's a good guess, but when they ran the numbers, the story completely flipped. It wasn't progesterone driving cortisol, it was the other way around. A bigger cortisol surge led to a bigger progesterone surge. As the study authors put it here, the progesterone increase appears to be a consequence of the cortisol surge. You can think of it as a secondary effect, a domino that falls only after the primary stress hormone, cortisol, has been released. Okay, so we've seen that the stress response is specific,
it's localized, and it involves some unexpected hormones. But so what? Why does all this biochemical detail matter? Let's connect this to a more practical understanding of stress in our lives.
Well, this new, more nuanced view has huge implications. First, it confirms your body is intelligent. It's not just reactive. Second, it helps explain why some stress, like exercise, is good for us, while chronic emotional stress is harmful. And that surprise progesterone, researchers speculate it might be an anti-anxiety agent released to help calm us down. Or maybe it's a chemical nudge to seek social connection after a stressful event. It's like a built-in recovery mechanism.
Speaking of nuance, let's look at epinephrine. Adrenaline, again. In the short term, yeah, we know it jacks up your blood pressure and blood sugar to prepare you for action. But what's fascinating is that over the long term, regular release of epinephrine from things like exercise may actually protect you from high blood pressure and insulin resistance.
And here's how that might work. That long-term protective effect seems to come from epinephrine stimulating what are called beta-2 receptors, which help relax blood vessels and enable your muscles to use sugar more efficiently. This is likely a key reason why good stress-like exercise is so healthy. The same exact chemical can be a problem or a solution. It all just depends on the context.
So we end with this question for you. Stress isn't a monolithic monster. It's a highly sophisticated, specific, and adaptable language your body uses to communicate with the world. Knowing that your body has this internal control panel capable of deploying the right response for the right challenge, how does that change the way you think about managing the stress in your own life?